Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blank and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
Yep. All right. Sit up. Pick up your camera. Hello and welcome to another episode of the GSMC television podcast. We're part of the mighty GSMC podcast network, and I'm your Phase 2 host, Howard Fletcher. I'm joined as always by my trusted engineer, Jack the Black Pug. He's been a little under the weather, but he's hanging in there. And we are positively honored and thrilled to be here with you once again. If you're new to the show, I'd like to give you a very warm welcome. Thank you for giving us a try. We appreciate you choosing us out of the myriad of podcasts and media that you can choose to spend your time with. You could be sitting at YouTube vegging out. You could be reading a book. The likelihood of that is probably low for some of you. Or you could be watch streaming TV, which we're going to be talking about in a few minutes. We aim to please here, so stick around. I'm sure you'll hear something that you like. We want you to keep coming back. And if you're one of our loyal return listeners, you know how I feel about you. You're truly the reason that I'm here. You're the reason that Jack is here. And we want to have some fun, so let's do it. We have another jam-packed show for you today. The SAG Awards, Screen Actors Guild Awards. They got back to Asia Kate Dillon. I'll tell you about that. Cobra Kai. They had their legs swept, but they found a new home. I'll tell you about that. Beetlejuice might be donning the cowl again. That's some big news. SpongeBob is making a Trolls move. And as always, I'll be bringing you news as it breaks, because you know I like breaking news. And I will be recapping the 6th episode of the Starz series, Hightown. But first, let's get started with some breaking Golden Globes news. The 2021 Golden Globes will take place on February 28th, about 8 weeks before the 93rd Academy Awards. The Hollywood Foreign Press Association made the announcement Monday morning. Just a week earlier, the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts and Sciences announced that the 93rd Academy Awards telecast has been postponed by 2 months to April 25th, 2021. Variety was the first to report that in mid-May, and I brought it to you here on this podcast. And we also told you that the Academy was considering delaying the big night in wake of the coronavirus pandemic, and that's exactly what they did. Here's a quote. Quote, to accommodate both domestic and international film and television productions, the HFPA, that's the Hollywood Foreign Press, will provide further guidance around eligibility, voting period, and revised nominations announcement timing in the coming weeks, end quote, the organization said. The new date means that the results of the Golden Globes could influence the Oscar nominations votings, as the process doesn't begin until a week later on March 5th. Now, I'm sure the Academy would like to believe that they don't look at what the Golden Globes do, and they are an independent body, but it might have an influence on it. The Golden Globes have usually been held on the first Sunday of the calendar year as a kickoff to the Hollywood Awards season. This year's edition was held on January 5th, with the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, or the HFPA, announcing 6 days later that Tina Fey and Amy Poehler would host the 2021 ceremonies. The HFPA did not detail the format of the Globes, but said the ceremony will air live on NBC, as usual, from the Beverly Hilton in Beverly Hills. The awards are voted on by a group of about 85 journalists who cover Hollywood for international outlets. In comparison, about 8,500 members of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences can vote for the Oscars. So as you can see, the HFPA is a very small group. Here is some breaking news about what the SAG Awards had to say to educate Dillon. Organizers of the SAG Awards will not act in the near future on calls to abolish gender-specific categories. Now, as reported on this podcast last week, you remember the Billion star, that's educate Dillon, wrote that the SAG Awards categories needed to change because they, quote, erase non-binary identities by limiting performers to identifying as male or female, man or woman, and serve as an endorsement to the gender binary at large, end quote. In its response to Dillon on Monday, the SAG Awards committee did acknowledge that, quote, the work is by no means done, end quote, when it comes to inclusivity, but indicated that the categories will remain the same for this year's awards due to a larger conversation being needed before making the change. All right, let me just interject here. I'll tell you what expression is getting way overused, and I'm tired of it now, is conversation. The conversation. We need to have a larger conversation. No, people need to obviously, conversation means there needs to be more communication. I get that. All right. And there does. That's very true. But what really needs to be done is people need to start making changes. Okay? Because obviously we wouldn't be having there wouldn't be a need for this larger conversation if there wasn't a large group of people who I believe is turning into the majority that want a change of some sort in several arenas, in several areas. This one is one. Now, this one might not be the majority right now for this non-binary thing. I don't know. But we have to find something else than larger conversation. The English language has so many words. It's like the word amazing. Okay? Amazing is like such a basic adjective that people can say something is spectacular, wonderful, excellent, superlative, so many different things instead of amazing. We just need to start using the language. And that's the end of that commentary. I digress a lot. The committee also outlined its view that the request to move to one non-binary specific category, quote, raises significant concerns in terms of gender parity as well as racial and ethnic diversity. Dillon drafted their own response, in which they said they are disappointed to learn that the SAG Awards will not be abolishing gender-specific categories ahead of the 2021 ceremony in January, and questioned the committee's logic that, quote, having female and male acting categories has done anything to ensure racial and ethnic diversity, end quote. Dillon, whose resume also includes Orange is the New Black, was initially asked to take part in the SAG Awards Motion Picture Nominating Committee, but has now officially declined that offer due to acting category's current exclusionary form. That's what she called it in her letter. And so I'm going to read her letter to the committee when they said that they weren't going to be changing. Here's her letter. Dear Kathy and the SAG Awards Committee, thank you for your response. I'm glad to hear that you strive to be as inclusive as possible and that you agree that the work is by no means done. I am also heartened by your acknowledgement that this is a larger conversation you're willing to have. There's that word again. I share your significant concern for gender parity as well as racial and ethnic diversity at the SAG Awards. My initial letter was inspired by those concerns, and I am disappointed to learn that you are not prepared to make changes for this upcoming 27th Screen Actors Guild Awards slated for January 24th of 2021. Now she had about 3 or 4 paragraphs that I'm just going to leave out. It's a very good letter. If you Google Asia Kate Dillon's letter to the SAG committee, you'll be able to find it, I'm sure. But I'm going to just read the closing of the letter. I don't have all the answers. All I can do is expose the problems and commit to working toward their solutions. I continue to believe that abolishing gendered acting categories in tandem with putting in place new regulations to ensure a significant increase in the BIPOC, which stands for Black, Indigenous, People of Color nominees, is a part of the solution. Ultimately, this will guarantee recognition of a much broader swath of work created by BIPOC of varying sexes and gender identities. In closing, I decline to participate as a judge in the acting categories in their current exclusionary form, but I look forward to our continued conversation. In love and solidarity, Asia Kate Dillon. Well, again, why am I going over this? One, because I wanted to give the closure to the story I reported last Friday about this. And secondly, I think that I admire her stance in this arena because, right now, even though the voices are growing, she is still one of very few voices that are willing to speak out about this issue of gender identity as far as how it's categorized on award shows. And she's willing to stick to her guns because this was quite an honor to be asked to be a judge for the Screen Actors Guild Awards, especially since her career is relatively young. That's a big honor to be turning down, and it shows the courage of her convictions. And so I certainly applaud her and admire her for making and taking that stand. And to end, here is some breaking Georgia boring tax news. The Georgia Film Tax Credit, long one of the world's most generous, listen, this is not hyperbole, the world's most generous subsidies for the entertainment industry could be on the chopping block as the state prepares spending to respond to an unprecedented budget crisis. Last Friday, the state Senate passed the $2.6 billion in cuts, including more than $1 billion in cuts to education and other things. In that context, the state's annual subsidy for Hollywood, which reached a record $860 million last year, is suddenly looking vulnerable. Quote, I think there is a political will to cap it, said Senator Matt Dollar, who chairs the House Working Group on Creative Arts and Entertainment and who is a big supporter of the credit. Quote, it's been talked about since the session started, end quote. On Monday, the Senate Finance Committee approved Bill HB 1037, that's not really important, that would mandate audits for all film and TV projects that claim the credit. The bill, which Dollar authored, came in response to a pair of state audits issued in January that identified numerous weaknesses in oversight of the program. The bill also included language that could have expanded the size of the credit by allowing commercials and other presentations to qualify, meaning videos. Senator Chuck Hustetler, the committee chairman, stripped that language out, saying he was not comfortable with expanding the credit. Why am I bringing this up on the TV podcast? I'll tell you why. Atlanta, I went to college in Atlanta for most of my undergraduate school time before they kicked me out of Georgia Tech. I went there. I was down there for quite a few years, for about 8 years. I wasn't in school that whole time, obviously. Anyway, in the early 80s, Atlanta was not the place it is today, which is almost Hollywood East. Why is it that way? Because it has been very friendly to production companies. As I started off this segment, it has been the most generous place in the world with tax credits for film production. That's why a lot of television shows start down there. That's why Tyler Perry built his film studio down there. That's why there's a lot of stuff in the film industry down there. If they cut this credit, it will be interesting to see whether these studios stay. I'm of the belief that many of them there are there solely for the tax credit. It's not that there's anything special about Georgia that makes it just perfect for filming. In fact, logistically, filming around Atlanta can be a little challenging. Outside of Atlanta, there's some great country in Georgia where you can film those types of scenes if you have a country scene and that type of thing. However, if they remove this tax credit, I'm wondering if these studios will leave. I'm wondering if even Tyler Perry Studios will stay down there. They probably will. And I don't think that they're going to cut this tax credit or strip it all the way out, because I'm pretty sure that those companies are going to let Georgia know that if you take this credit out, we're leaving. So this is going to be something to keep your eye on if you're interested in about film production, about where these shows are being shot and why they're being shot there. A lot of these are in Georgia because of this tax credit. And I thought it was a very interesting story that they said that they were thinking about removing it, which I think would be dumb. Although I know everyone needs the money. They just need to reduce it maybe, but don't strip it out. Because the film and TV studios, a good deal of them will leave or cut their number of productions that they make in the state. Next, I'm going to talk about The Karate Kid, kind of. Cobra Kai, a show that aired on YouTube. I've never watched a show like this on YouTube Premium. So if you have, I'd like to hear about that, but I'll get into that next segment. And also some other developments on Netflix. Go get something to eat, get some refreshments. We got to pay some bills. Be right back. Thanks for listening. You ever been to Georgia, Jack? It's hot as a mug. I don't know if they're going to take what they're going to do with that tax thing. We're back. And I don't know if you all ever watched The Karate Kid, the old school Karate Kid. I only saw it once, and that was back when it first opened. But it's a very popular movie, made Ralph Macchio a star at the time. Some of you probably don't even know who Ralph Macchio is now. But there was a show, Cobra Kai, that was a sequel to the Karate Kid years later. And Cobra Kai is leaving YouTube Premium, which is where that's where it aired, for a new home. And the new home is going to be, you guessed it, at Netflix. And it's going to be the third season of the show. And we'll see. Now that it's on Netflix, I might check it out, or whenever it gets on Netflix. I'm sure I won't watch it, but I'm interested to see how they continued the story. Anyway, under the terms of the deal, the first 2 seasons of the series will be available on Netflix later this year. So hold on to your hats. The premiere date for season 3, which will be the new season, will be announced at a later date. News of the move comes 36 years to the day after the premiere of the first Karate Kid film. The film grossed over $90 million when it was first released, which was a lot of cash back then in the 80s. For a movie, especially a movie of that size. The film also landed an Oscar nomination for Pat Morita, who was Mr. Miyagi, who, if anyone watched the film, wax on, wax off. Unforgettable guy. It ultimately inspired an additional 3 sequels and a short-lived animated series. I miss the animated series. And a 2010 film reboot starring Jaden Smith and Jackie Chan, which I've never watched. Why? Because it starred Jaden Smith and Jackie Chan. Here's a quote. Quote, "The appeal of the Karate Kid saga is timeless, and Cobra Kai picks up right where it left off without missing a beat," said Brian Wright, vice president of the original series at Netflix. Quote, "The rivalry between Daniel and Johnny is one for the ages, and the show has a ton of heart and is a lot of fun. We can't wait to introduce a new generation of fans to Cobra Kai and are thrilled to be its new home around the world," end quote. The series continues the story of the Karate Kid franchise, with Ralph Macchio and William Zabka reprising their roles as Daniel LaRusso and Johnny Lawrence, respectively. Martin Kove also joined the series at the end of season 1, reprising the role of Sensei John Kreese. According to sources, this was not the first attempt to move the series to Netflix. A similar move was attempted ahead of season 2, but that deal ultimately did not go through. Cobra Kai has proven incredibly popular since it debuted. Now, on the side, now I know this isn't targeting my demographic. I'm way too old probably to be watching this, but I know nobody and have heard of nobody even on social media. I've heard no talk about, I knew that a Cobra Kai show was out only because of a commercial that's on television now. Not for the show, but for, they took the guy who plays the sensei and made a commercial with him. That's the only reason I know this thing is a thing. But I know no one who's watched this show. Anyway, back to this. The first season scored a 100% critical approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes, for what that's worth, and season 2 is netting an 88% rating. The show was also nominated for Best Stunt Coordination for a comedy series or variety program for both its first and second seasons. Now, I've been watching award shows as long as I can remember. You know, they've been around my whole life. I don't ever remember seeing the award for Best Stunt Coordination for a comedy series or variety program. That must be one of those awards that they award like the day before or off screen. I had no idea there was such a thing. I'm very happy for the stunt people that qualify and win these awards, because I'm sure they earn them. I'm just saying I had no idea that was a thing. Quote, "We are so proud of Cobra Kai and are overwhelmed by the massive fan response to the series," Sony Pictures Television President Jeff Frost said. Josh, John, Hayden, Ralph, and William, and the entire cast have done such a brilliant job with this sensational series, and the huge audience reaction and sentiment for it is a testament to that. We are very grateful to our partners at Netflix and couldn't be more elated that they have become the new home for this epic saga, end quote. Here's another quote. "Making Cobra Kai has been a dream come true for us since day one," Harold, Hurwitz, and Schlossberg, the producers of the show, said in a statement. "We are thankful for the tireless dedication of Jeff Frost, Chris Parnell of Saturday Night Live fame, Jason Kotfelder, Karen Tavazian, and all our partners at Sony for finding us a new home where we can not only continue the series, but also explore opportunities to further expand the Karate Kid universe. We are beyond excited to join our new partners at Netflix and look forward to the show reaching the massive global audience who loves this franchise as much as we do," end quote. Now, this is the second YouTube premium show. As I said before, never watched YouTube Premium before, but it's the second show in recent weeks to find a new home. The previous canceled Step Up High Water was picked up for a third season at Starz in late May. Now, I will say this about these shows, though, or these moves. And this is I really respect YouTube. You know, as I think I've said on the show before, for them to even just maintain the servers to carry all those videos, whoever's running that thing deserves a big pat on the back. Even though they're racking up dough, still they deserve a big pat on the back because it's no small undertaking. And for them to develop and produce and run their own original content is a big step. And, you know, not everyone can do it. And I do, I admire the fact that they are saying, okay, maybe this is not our thing. But the fact that Netflix and Starz, two very successful companies, picked these series up tells me that they're quality series. I mean, they're not necessarily, I don't know what they are. I don't know what Step Up High Water is. Don't know. Okay, hold on. I'm going to check. All right, on Wikipedia, which is the most reliable source I have on stuff like this. Here's the premise. Step Up High Water follows the students and faculty of High Water, Atlanta's most cutthroat performing arts school. That's also on the sign. High Water High, Atlanta's most cutthroat performing arts school. When twins, Tal and Jeanette, relocate from Ohio, they find themselves thrust into a world where every move is a test. As they attempt to navigate their new world on and off the dance floor, they discover just how deep they're willing to dig to realize their dreams and seize the moment. Step up. Okay. All right. Well, that's the show. But I will say this, much like, you know, when I said that the CW show, like I watched some of the superhero shows, Flash, Arrow when it was on, those things. But I don't watch Supernatural and some of the other shows, those other shows. I know that there's not much difference. There's not that many degrees of separation between the Flash and Supernatural on the CW. Only the situation whether there's the powers or supernatural powers or it's somebody running at super speed. It's pretty much a teen soap opera, a young kid's soap opera type of thing going on. That's the CW's niche. That's what they do. Starz is very good at doing the sensational, thumping music score, beautiful people type of shows. And so Step Up is, or whatever, High Water Step Up is that type of show. So I think Starz, it'll do well on Starz, you know, and Starz is a perfect show for Starz. Cobra Kai, you know, Netflix has it all. And I'm sure this Cobra Kai thing will be just great on Netflix. I'll watch one of them. You know, I don't know. I doubt I'll watch Step Up, but it's not for me. But it sounds like it's going to do well, if you ask me. Well, with Cobra Kai now leaving, YouTube Premium is now out of the premium scripted space altogether. YouTube's subscription service previously aired shows like Step Up High Water, Wayne, Ryan Hansen Solves Crimes on television, and Dallas and Robo. Have not heard of any of those shows, just heard of Step Up High Water. However, those are all scripted shows. YouTube shifted its strategy in the original content space last year, and instead they're going to focus on unscripted fare and docuseries. I love docuseries. The unscripted fare is the reality show space, and I think that's a great place for YouTube to be. I'm not a reality show fan, but a lot of the user content on YouTube might as well be a reality show fare, so I think they'll do quite well. Here is some breaking news out of Gotham City. Michael Keaton is in early talks to return, and by the time you hear this podcast, I bet you will have gone through, to return to portray Batman alongside Ezra Miller in Warner Brothers' film The Flash. Keaton first played the Caped Crusader in Tim Burton's 1989 Batman and returned to collaborate with Burton in 1992's Batman Returns. He left the role during the development of the third film, Batman Forever, and Val Kilmer took over as Batman. And Joel Schumacher, who just passed yesterday, who is a great director. I think the Batman films were you know, I'm sure he got paid well. And it's not a bad thing, a trivia question to say, okay, I directed these two bad Batman films. But while I would never call Joel Schumacher a great director, he directed movies that I certainly enjoyed, like Sparkle, Car Wash, DC Cab, St. Elmo's Fire, Falling Down. I love with Michael Douglas, The Client, 8mm, Bad Company, Phone Booth. He was a good director. He made good Hollywood movies. So, you know, it's just too bad that the only thing we remember him for, the first thing that's probably going to be on his obituary is that he made these two crap Batman movies, and they are crap. He had the Batman with the nipples on the, you know, the George Clooney Batman with the nipples on the breastplate of the uniform. It was terrible. Anyway, Andy Muschietti is who is supposed to be directing this new Flash, which is dated to come out June of 2022, which is a long way away. It's uncertain how big a role Keaton will play in The Flash if he takes the role, but I have to believe that it's going to be pretty small. And if they're going to go with the storyline that I believe they're going to go with, this is obviously going to be the end of Batman's, the back end, not the end like he's going to die, but the back end of Batman's career where Bruce Wayne is in late middle age and Batman's pretty much retired, but he's going to help the Flash in this time jumping type of situation. Keaton has remained active in recent years, and he earned his first Academy Award nomination in 2015 for Best Actor in Birdman. I'm looking forward to seeing where this goes. It's a lot of time between now and the filming of the movie and the releasing of the movie, and so a lot can happen. As I've said on this show before, when we talked about the DC Universe and some of the recent productions of theirs, I do not like Ezra Miller as the Flash. I just don't like the way they have framed that character, but it is what it is. Those of you who listen to this podcast know that I am a comic book reader. I am a Batman fan, and I do like the Batman stories that even though this won't be a Batman story, it'll be technically a Flash story. I do like Batman stories that deal with Bruce Wayne in his middle-aged to older days, and Batman is pretty much off the street. I think that's kind of an interesting time period in his life when he can reflect on his career as the Batman, and there's a lot of good plots and a lot of good writing that can come out of that. So we will see what we will see. Next, I'll be talking a little bit more about streaming and about some productions that might have thought they were going to the theaters, but decided to go to streaming. I'm always going to bring you that story because, as you know, that's what I think the future is going to be with a lot of these productions and a lot of movies. And also, when you talk about streaming, you can't not talk about Netflix. So I have a little bit more Netflix news for you. So go wet your whistle. Jack's going to take a bathroom break. I'm going to get something to eat, and I'm going to be back after we pay these bills. Don't go away. We're going to be right back in less than a minute. Don't forget to email me at podcasthoward@gmail.com, and I'll go check my mailbox now, and we'll be back in a moment. Don't go away. Thanks for listening. All right. You ever watch Nickelodeon, Jack? I haven't. We are back, and I have a movie to tell you about. The SpongeBob movie, Sponge on the Run. It's a Paramount and Nickelodeon production, and it's based on the absorbent underwater fry cook. Well, guess what it's doing? It's skipping its planned theatrical debut. It will instead launch on premium rental services before it lands exclusively on CBS All Access, the streaming service owned by the studio's parent company, Viacom-CBS, in the U.S. in early 2021. It was originally slated to hit the big screen on May 22nd, but it was postponed until August 7th due to the coronavirus pandemic. And here's your quote. Quote, "We are thrilled to have the SpongeBob movie, Sponge on the Run, a premier first-run movie from one of Viacom-CBS's biggest brands, join CBS All Access's expanding slate of franchise content from across Viacom-CBS," said Mark Mark DeBevois. I think it's Mark DeBevois. Okay, let's say Mark DeBevois, Chief Digital Officer at Viacom-CBS and President and CEO of Viacom-CBS Digital. Okay, first thing, Mark DeBevois. If I mispronounce your name, I am surely sorry, because with all those titles, you could probably offer me a job. So, not at this rate, but maybe. Quote, "This launch will be perfectly timed with our continued expansion and planned rebranding of the service in early 2021 as we welcome SpongeBob and the gang from Bikini Bottom to the service in the biggest possible way." End quote. Okay, why am I bringing this up on the TV podcast? Well, obviously, you got CBS All Access in here, but this is just another movie that was planning to go to the big screen and has decided, primarily due to the coronavirus, but also this is going to take care of a lot of things for CBS All Access. One, it gives it new content, new original content, which is going to be a driver to get membership. And they're probably going to get more eyes on this thing because of coronavirus through video on demand than if they went ahead and put this in the theater. At least that's what I believe. All prior seasons of SpongeBob SquarePants will be available on CBS All Access as part of its ongoing expansion. In May, Viacom-CBS CEO Bob Bakish announced that CBS All Access will undergo rebranding to incorporate more of the company's cable's brands and library programming, including Paramount Pictures' vast film category and Comedy Central, Nickelodeon, BET, Smithsonian, and MTV channels. I wonder if they have any of like MTV's video library. They should run another video channel. Somebody ought to do that. You listening, CBS? Run that on All Access, and I might become a member. Here's another quote. "We're incredibly happy to give kids and families a much-deserved lift in any way we can. And in the Prime Video on Demand release of the new SpongeBob theatrical, and putting all seasons of the TV series on CBS All Access are two of the best ways I can think of to get immersed in the optimism and joy that this terrific character represents, added Ramsey Niato, Executive Vice President of Nickelodeon Animation, Production, and Development. That is a long title. Numerous movies, including Universal's Trolls World Tour, you've heard all about that on this podcast, and The King of Staten Island, Warner Brothers Animated Adventure Scoob, and Disney's Artemis Fowl, all titles we've talked about on this show several times, have opted to forego traditional theatrical releases since cinemas across the country have closed in mid-March to help stop the spread of coronavirus. Paramount recently sold its romantic comedy The Lovebirds to Netflix, given the uncertainty over when theaters might reopen. It was also supposed to release Aaron Sorkin's The Trial of the Chicago Five this fall, but Netflix is negotiating a deal to buy that movie from Cross Creek Pictures, the film's financier. AMC, Regal, Cinemark, the three biggest theater chains, all plan to resume business sometime in July. Hollywood studios have mostly cleared their calendars through summer, but a handful of new movies are expected to greet moviegoers when multiplexes reopen next month. Disney's Mulan on July 24th will be the first major release, followed by Christopher Nolan's Tenet on July 31st. Two smaller titles will open first. Russell Crowe's thriller, Unhinged, that might be a biopic of Russell Crowe, on July 10th, and Sony Pictures' rom-com, The Broken Hearts Gallery, on July 17th. All right, and I've mentioned this before. Those two films, Unhinged and The Broken Hearts Gallery, they're going to be the barometer, the thermometer and barometer that the studios are going to use along with the release of Inception on July 17th as to whether they're going to release these blockbusters. Trust me, if Unhinged doesn't do well, put a title like that, it might not, but it doesn't do well. I don't know anything about the Broken Hearts Gallery, but if Inception does not do the right number, I know I sound like a broken record, but Mulan is not going to open on July 24th, and definitely Tenet is not going to open on July 31st. It's just not. Sponge on the Run sees best friends SpongeBob SquarePants and Patrick Star venture out of Bikini Bottom and head to the lost city of Atlantic City on a rescue mission to save SpongeBob's trustee, Snail Gary. It's the third SpongeBob film after 2004's SpongeBob SquarePants movie and 2015's The SpongeBob movie, Sponge Out of Water. Those movies were commercially successful, earning over $450 million globally. So, I think it's a very interesting, I didn't know that before I said something about them putting this Sponge on the Run movie on video on demand. Now, with SpongeBob, the past two movies doing that well, it's showing me something that CBS and Viacom are not willing to put that movie in the theaters because it obviously would be a moneymaker. I don't think they have much faith that people are going to be bringing children into the theater, and I would agree with them. And that's why I wonder about Mulan. I mean, Mulan's going to be a movie for all ages, but primarily it's a family movie. And I know Disney, it would look better on a big screen. And I know Disney filmed it to be shown on a big screen. So that's why I don't think it's going to go to video on demand. But I certainly don't think Disney's going to roll that out in the theaters if nobody's going to the theater. They're going to wait till people start going before they put their big gun out there. So we'll see how it goes. That's why I brought it up here on the TV podcast, because I think in the next 2 years, your sets on the small screen, well, nowadays, depends who you are. Your small screen might not be that small anymore. It's going to have some content on it that it might have had to wait a couple of years to have by the time it got to video on demand and or cable or streaming services. I think a lot of these movies that were made within the last 3 years that were intended to be initially released in the theater aren't going to make it. Now, I hate to be the bearer, I'm not doom and gloom. I just don't think, even if, unless we have a vaccine, that's all I'm saying. Unless we know it's, almost 100%, not 100%, but the threat of coronavirus is not out there and it's not an unknown. I just don't think people are willing to take that risk in the movie theater. And I guess that's what that's what I'm saying. It's different than having to fly to go to a wedding. You might have to go ahead and, mask up and, do what you got to do to go to this particular one of a kind, one time in a lifetime event. But, you may not want to take your life in your hands just to go see Mulan, or even if it's not a deadly situation, you don't want to catch this thing take it from somebody who has a lot of people who work in healthcare. It's an ugly disease. You don't want to just catch it if you don't have to. That's all. And I think the theaters are going to be fighting that battle, unfortunately. So that's that for SpongeBob. Look for it on a TV near you. And here is some Chicken Run breaking news. 20 years to the day after its theatrical release, Aardman Animation Studios has confirmed that it will produce a Chicken Run sequel, this time backed by Netflix, who will distribute the film globally outside of China. The sequel announcement was delivered during an Annecy making-of panel. Now, Annecy is a French animation festival, film festival. And they have these panels where they, just like Comic-Con, where people sit down and they talk about a particular film and how they made it and the things they did and answer questions. Anyway, on that film's digital platform, they had a panel and they announced that they were going to be making this sequel. Now, the sequel has been long rumored, but the involvement of Netflix is some pretty major news. A Netflix release that coincided with the presentation explained that Studio Canal, which has financed and distributed and sold Aardman Productions since the 2015 Shaun the Sheep movie, and Path, which backed the original, have closed the deal with Aardman to allow the transfer of the sequel rights to Netflix, which is pretty big. Now, Netflix's Chicken on the Run sequel will turn on Ginger, now living in a human-free chicken paradise. There, Ginger and Rocky hatch an egg together, and daughter Molly is born. The girl grows up quickly, as chickens do, and Molly begins to outgrow the island. At the same time, rumors start to float of a new and terrible threat on the mainland, forcing Ginger to rally her troops and put their own hard-won freedom at risk for the good of all chicken kind. Well, that sounds quite exciting. Maybe they heard about the pandemic on the mainland and they had to go save the other chickens before we eat them, I guess. Anyway, I brought that up, especially in that, in this particular section where we were talking about SpongeBob going to streaming, that here's another sequel. Those Chicken Run movies did well too. They did just as well as the SpongeBob movies did that I mentioned previously in this segment. Yet they decided to go with Netflix. Why? Because they probably got a pretty good offer. Number one, it's been a little while for Chicken on the Run, so of course you never know how sequels are going to do. But family movies before the pandemic were usually a sure bet. If you check the numbers, some of the highest grossing movies in the past 15 years, I'll say, have been on what I think, not that I'm an animation connoisseur, but I've seen my share, on things that are average, if you ask me. But there are only so many films that you can take children under 12 to, and the entire family and grandma, and you can sit and watch with your mother and all of that. And, some people just don't have a taste for what's out there. They prefer family entertainment. So it's a sure bet that, and people like going to the theater, at least they used to before, was, a daring situation, which it is right now. So I think it's a pretty telltale thing that Aardman decided to go with Netflix rather than even negotiate a possible movie deal. I thought that was pretty interesting. Now, and I hate to be, and that this isn't a political podcast. This is just a reality. In my opinion, it's just a reality. The president had this rally in Tulsa earlier this week, and last night, because I am recording this on a Wednesday, last night he had a rally at a church in Arizona. Both are hotspots for COVID. So I would think that the results, what happens in the next 2 weeks with those populations will tell us a lot about what it's going to be like in the movie theaters. Now, granted, those particular populations were not going by guidelines. Very few people were wearing masks. Very few, they weren't distanced at all. They were doing all the wrong things as far as the CDC suggestions. So, you know, that might be a reason if there's a big spread in infection. However, if it still will tell us that we're not past this thing. You know, if there are widespread infections because of those situations, it'll tell us that we're not past this thing, and people might not want to go to the theater, even with distancing, even with masks. So we'll have to see. But go buy a good TV set, y'all, because I think streaming is a thing that's going to be just the paradigm from now on. All right, next we have the Hightown recap. I know you all have been just on the edge of your seats waiting for me to get to this last segment. I'm going to go through the last or the latest episode of Hightown, which was episode 6, which aired last Sunday, and things are about the same as they were before. Go get some refreshments. Don't go away. Thank you for listening. I'll be right back.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now, don't bother, what's hot on Netflix, and everything in between. That's GSMCpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, I am back. Not going to be talking about SpongeBob. Not going to be talking about Chicken Run. We're talking about, yes, right, the recap of the 6th episode of Hightown. And if you hear if you hear a little bit of noise in the background, it's because for some reason where I live, the county has decided to trim all of the trees and use it all on a wood chipper. And even with all my soundproofing, I can still hear it. So hopefully you're not hearing that. Okay, if you are, I apologize if you're not. Don't worry about it. Let's get down to it. Junior in Hightown. Junior, he's not coping well with Krista's murder. Not at all. He doesn't like it. He worries that his girlfriend, who initially thinks that he's using drugs again, well, he's not. He's just messed up because of watching Krista getting smashed, her head smashed with an iron, which would mess anybody up, I think. I wouldn't be surprised if Junior goes off the deep end by season's end. You know, because every episode he seems a little bit more screwed up, and he is a recovering addict, and so I wouldn't be surprised if for some reason he falls off the wagon. So he doesn't, that iron situation, that murder doesn't straighten his life. He doesn't get scared straight because of that. Instead, he gets even deeper into selling drugs. And especially now, since Osito, his I guess his boss, and the guy who did kill Krista, has officially decided to kind of step out on Frankie, who is their big boss, who's in prison, and decide to do a side business that I think he's decided to put Junior in charge of. He, Osito, that is, bought some drugs from Wayne. That's the guy they got the hot shot for Krista for last week. Hopefully some of you are watching the show, because I imagine it sounds quite convoluted. He struck a deal with Osito. Okay. And he said, all right, I'll sell you these drugs. And so he gave Osito a good deal. And Osito said, if I can get rid of this, then we'll do bigger and better things, which seems to make Wayne pretty happy. Osito gets these drugs that he gets from his guy Wayne, and he gives them to Junior, and he also gives Junior a gun. Because, if this is a show, right? So he gives Junior a gun, and he says, you're a soldier now, take this gun. And I'm sure no good is going to come of that gun. It rarely does. So it's going to come back into play within the final 2 episodes of this season, no doubt. So you can imagine there will be some fireworks before the end of this thing. And even though Junior might not be using again, he's still blowing off his responsibilities. He left his girl and his daughter hanging when she wanted to. They're thinking about moving out and getting their own place. And she told him about a townhouse she thought was really nice. And she went to meet a realtor there, and she asked Junior to meet her there at 3:00, I think. But Junior bails on the plans. He chooses instead to antagonize drug users on the Cape as he's selling them drugs. Because I guess he just doesn't feel good about what he's doing, so he decides to pick fights with his customers. Doesn't make sense. Anyway, the worst moment comes for Junior when he shows up at a motel room filled with 3 of these, leather BDSM guys who were all roided up. See, this is the thing about Hightown, folks. While Hightown did introduce me to Provincetown, which I didn't know existed, I just watched the documentary about Roy Cohn and who happened to be gay, and he used to party up there all the time. I just didn't know. I didn't know this thing existed. But anyway, that's where they are. And these guys look like they are straight out of Cruising with Al Pacino, except for the bodybuilder version. It's like Pumping Iron 3 leather version. And so he goes in there and he not only ups the price of the drugs, but he also throws in a few homophobic digs and talks about how they look. So you know how this is going to end up. These big guys in these leather thongs and biker hats end up beating him up in this hotel room, which, at the end of the scene, you see him smiling. So you get the idea that he was trying to egg them on so they would beat him up, because I guess he just feels like he's worthless now. I don't know, but that's what they decided to do. I don't personally think Junior's a homophobe. He seems to be verging on suicidal, so they beat him to a bloody pulp. So let's move on to Jackie, who at the end of last episode found out that Krista was dead through her phone conversation with Ray, the cop, who was at the scene investigating the crime. Krista's death serves as a significant turning point for Jackie. She goes to an AA meeting and confesses her latest screw-up to Ed. Ed is her partner and her fish cop partner, older gentleman, seems to be somewhat of a father figure to her. Maybe this time Jackie will manage to stay clean for good. Not that I care at this point, because Jackie is a character that I find just not likable. Jackie's not backing down from ensuring that the men responsible for Sherry and Krista's death are behind bars. She finally learns the name of Frankie Cuevas, and she begins doing some digging into his past. Frankie Cuevas is the drug kingpin in prison. She knows he's in jail and that the one responsible for all the murders, but she also wants to make sure that he stays in prison until the end of time, because she's just that mad that he killed these 2 girls that she didn't know at all. Something that I think is inconsistent in the characterization, in the character development of Jackie. And that's why I say I don't like this. I'm not liking this show because things don't make sense to me. Jackie seems like first thing, she's a fish cop in Provincetown and seems to be somebody who's a townie there, knows the place, and this place has an opiate problem. So between overdoses and drug deaths, I would think that she's used to this. Now, granted, she did find the body at the beginning of the show, and I guess that would gave her a vested interest in this case, but she just seems a little bit more upset than I would think she is, because she doesn't seem to care about much of anything else in her life. So these two strangers are suddenly her mission. So I don't get it, but that's what she's doing. Anyway, during her research into Frankie, she digs up Renee's name and her place of work. Renee is the stripper who is the father of Renee's baby. Jackie decides to visit Renee at the strip club undercover. Renee's name is Candy at the club because everyone has a stripper name. And she goes to Xavier's. Xavier's is the name of the strip club. Jackie pays for a private dance to get some time alone with Renee, and she awkwardly segues into hot water with her about when she starts asking about Frankie. Well, Renee is not pleased. She already had an unpleasant visit with Frankie at jail earlier in the episode, and during that visit with Frankie, she essentially called her a whore and called her trash and claimed that she would be stuck with him forever, which she didn't seem too happy about. Frankie also reveals that Ray has a bad habit of sleeping with the women he's trying to get information out of, although we don't yet know how the reveal is going to play out between Renee and Ray just yet. She kind of sat on that information. By the way, the budding Renee-Ray romance, that also is pretty unbelievable. It seems that she is falling for him because he gave her an iPad that, oh, by the way, he was given to him. He didn't even buy it. And, you know, it just doesn't seem believable that she would fall in love with this guy, knowing he's a cop and knowing that even though she doesn't like her boyfriend, father of the guy who's in prison, is the father of her child. I just don't understand where this romance comes from. Back to Jackie. Renee tells Jackie to F off during the lap dance, and so the visit leads to a dead end, except Renee advises Jackie to visit Frankie herself if she wants answers so bad. So guess what Jackie does? Jackie goes down to visit Frankie in prison. And, oh, by the way, this is where the writer of the episode and the showrunners, in my opinion, show their naivete about the penal system. Although I don't know how it works in Provincetown, but I imagine it works the same way as it works everywhere. Jackie tells us that she got in there without having to be on Frankie's visitation list because she works for the feds. Now, that's true, she does work for the federal government, but she works as a fish cop. Not the FBI, not the CIA, not NSA, nothing like that. She's a fish cop in that town. And I just doubt that they would just put her, if just on her word, she could go in there and get on the visitation list of this guy who obviously has an in with the guards there because we saw the scene of him having a conjugal visit when you're not supposed to have a conjugal visit. So he obviously has perks within the guard community, so it just doesn't make sense. So anyway, she walks in, she put herself right onto his radar, revealing basically everything she knows about him and his operation. And so he threatens her, and she threatens him right back. And I'm not sure that was the smartest decision on her part, but they know they don't like each other. However, her chat with Frankie reveals one crucial fact. Somebody she knows has been talking to him because Frankie knows who she is and where she works. She immediately heads to work and bribes one of her coworkers into letting her use the database at the precinct so she can find out who took the boat out to drop this body. Oh, jeez. Ray doesn't have a ton to do in this episode except to be a shoulder to cry on for Renee. Ray is the state cop. She turns away from her son for 1 second and he leaps off the couch and busts his head open, requiring stitches. So Ray rushes down to the hospital to be with her and offers her some support. Another attempt for the showrunners to develop chemistry between these two, which is very unsuccessful in my view, but that's what the purpose of that scene was, I guess. Then Ray and another cop named Leslie close in on Scotty, a drug dealer. After questioning Scotty, they get closer to Osito, but not close enough. Ray and his partner Alan bring Osito down to the station after finding him holed up with his girlfriend Kathleen. The problem is that they don't have anything to hold him on, and Osito knows that. Kathleen calls his lawyer, and Osito clams up until his attorney gets there, leaving Ray back at square one. Now, I get the feeling he's going to do something extra reckless in the final 2 episodes so that he can nail Osito once and for all, but we will see what happens. In the final moments of the episode, Jackie realizes that it was Junior who took the boat out the night Sherry died. She also seems to link him to Frankie, meaning that he might be the one that told Frankie about her and her job. So now the person she thought was her good friend might be somebody who she has to turn in and is betraying her. So it's a big soap opera at Hightown. This is not one I'm going to finish it out because that's what I'm going to recap it. But folks, and it's still better than Creepshow, okay? It's still better than Creepshow, but this is not one I'm recommending, just for the record. And that's it for this episode. So thank you for listening to the GSMC Television Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review for us because it really helps us grow, and that's what we're trying to do. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, it would be good. Please remember to email me at podcasthoward@gmail.com with any requests for the show, anything you want me to cover, or any feedback you have for me. And listen, I read all the email on the show. I like to do that. So send me an email, please. Listen, I know we're on some strange and challenging times right now. Let's all try to pull through this thing together. We are still in a worldwide pandemic. This isn't a political situation. This is a real scientific situation. So please remember to wash your hands often, limit your close and personal interaction with people if you can, and wear a mask when you go out of the house. You know, and it's really not for your protection. It's for the protection of the people you're around, because whether you feel good or bad or you have symptoms or not, you still might be carrying the virus, and you don't want to spread it to anybody else. So with that, have a safe and good week. I will see you again on Friday when my next episode drops. Until we meet again, stream with care. Jack and I love you guys. Be kind to one another. And if you have Netflix, watch as much Hannibal as you possibly can. And then email me and let me know what you think. I think it's a great show. I hate to keep lobbying for it, but you'll hear this from me until I find something else that I remember that you should watch. Take care. Drive safely. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Television Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.